This is the Behavioral View. I'm Shannon Hill, and joining me is Nissa Van Etten. We're your hosts for candid conversations about applied behavior analysis. No gimmicks, just real talk, practical tips, and maybe a few laughs. Come on and join us. Let's have some fun. Hey everyone, would you like to get at CEU for this episode? Listen closely for the announcement of 3 secret words delivered throughout the episode. Take note of those words, and we'll tell you where to go to get your CEU when the show is over. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Behavioral View. I'm Shannon Hill, and my goal for today is to stay still during this and try to look professional because I've noticed lately that I move around a whole lot during these videos. I am the editor-in-chief at CentralReach Institute, and I am here with Nissa. Nissa, you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone.
I mean, you can say more than that.
I'm excited to join this conversation. I am the Director of Clinical Training at the CR Institute here at CentralReach.
And we are keeping it all CR in-house today on the Behavioral View. I'm going to just go ahead and kick it off to Joanne. You want to say hi and kind of introduce yourself and your role here?
Absolutely. I am so pumped. Today is my first opportunity to be on a Behavioral View and hang out with this awesome group. I am the Senior Director of Education Strategy here at CentralReach.
Great. And we're really excited to have you here. And we're also excited to have Kelly King. Kelly, what's your job? What do you do here?
What do I do here right now? Hey, y'all, I'm Kelly King. I'm a content developer by job title here at CentralReach Institute. And I've done some dibble-dabbling lately in AI world. So excited about that and excited to be here with you all.
Today we're focusing on school-related issues. And I know that we've got a lot of people out there who are going to be excited about this because we get a lot of feedback saying, let's talk about schools. And Kelly, you have a background in schools before you came to CR. Nissa, not sure. Have you done school stuff?
I went to school.
You went to school?
Oh, the starting place for everybody, right?
I did work as an educational consultant and then a lot of IEP support in schools.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be interesting because, people who watch us regularly have heard me talk a little bit, but my school relationships have been mostly as a behavior consultant. So I was coming in mostly to do FBAs and then teacher training and developed some hypotheses about ways to support in order to prevent FBAs that maybe we'll talk about a little bit. But when you came to join us, Joanne, it was based on some school-related products. You want to take just a second and talk about that before we kick into our fun questions of the day and such?
Yeah, absolutely. So I joined CentralReach by way of what was previously Lifted, and now I'm proud to say is CR Lifted. It is a product that I co-founded and developed alongside my brother and co-founder at the time to support IEP-based data collection as well as behavioral progress monitoring.
Right. That is so cool. So integrating that data is quite a challenge. So this is going to be a fun discussion, but we're going to really focus today on transitions and working together as a team from whether you're an educator or a behaviorist. I'm just going to leave it in those 2 broad categories instead of trying to get into all those job titles. But we like to launch off with the question of the day just to get started. And Joanne, you selected one that is a good one. We have done it before when Andrew and Kent were here from Morningside. And similar today, we were having really bad weather where I am. And we are again today. And I lost my internet connection and I wasn't even able to participate. So I didn't have to, I've been sitting on this one for a little bit. So I get to join the conversation. The question is, and it's vague, tell us about a teacher who made an impact on you. So who wants to go first?
Hold on. First, I might have the youngest age. The teacher that I'm picking, the educator that I'm picking is actually my 2nd grade teacher, which coincidentally is one that might be the last elementary teacher I remember. But it was my first educator that was a person of color. It was my first educator in a public school setting. I had moved from one area to another, and it wasn't too far out, but I felt like I was moving into the middle of nowhere, and everything new, everything different. And I just remember feeling the love and the support. I was going from a Catholic school setting to a public school education, and it just resonated with me as being so different, and so inclusive in a way that I think has helped shape my, interest in different groups and understanding groups of people, but also just feeling so, privileged to have the experience of having a Black female educator, which I know statistically is not always the case. And I think everybody could and should have that experience and benefit. So that was the one that came to mind. I also, jokingly say often that I don't remember a lot of my educational time in childhood. So this is one that resonated and stuck with me for a while. And so shout out to Mrs. Gold if you're still around, my second grade teacher.
Nice.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
She sounds pretty golden.
She was, and she wore all
Great
gold
hair for it.
jewelry, and she was just a sight to be seen. It was wonderful in all of the ways.
Oh, yeah. I remember that elementary school teachers who really came with the jewelry, the accessories, the fuzzy sweaters, things like that, that as a young girl, I was just so pleased that they did that. What about you, Joanne? Who did you select?
Yeah, so my teacher, well, first, I love this question because I think Nissa's point of, I went to school, right? Many people have that shared experience of schooling at some point. So it's always exciting to hear how those experiences never leave you and never leave you quite the same. So mine would be Miss Abbott Marco, who was my fifth grade teacher. And she just had a lovingly balance of also applying the right amount of just opportunities to really make you soar. So it's hard to kind of have that handle with fifth graders, potentially like pre-middle school, to help affirm you and help you become really self-aware, make you feel really loved and nurtured, but also like, I'm going to push you because this next season is going to require a lot out of you. Ironically, when I went into high school and I knew I wanted to study special education, she became the first teacher in our district to be selected to launch the first formerly known as inclusion classroom. Oh, wow. And then I went back and volunteered in her classroom. And I know that's what solidified I'm going to go to college and study special education, because I think she was doing special education all along because she made everybody feel so special. So shout out to Miss Abbott Marco. I'm going to follow Kelly's initiative there.
I like it.
Yeah.
Nissa, you want it?
Well, I answered the original question in the previous podcast, so I'm going to change my answer this time. And I'm going to pick someone who most recently impacted my education. That's Dr. Crystal Jansreichen, or Dr. JR. She was my dissertation chair. And 2 years ago, as I think many students in their PhD program kind of come up to the dissertation process, it becomes I'm just going to quit. I'm done. This was great. I'll do all but the dissertation and just walk away. And Dr. JR had such a nice way of making you feel supported, asking the questions that kept you thinking and passionate about your topic and your research. So Dr. JR is phenomenal, and I love her. And really, I've never met her in person, but I hope to one day. She's here in Texas as well. So put that out there, Dr. JR. I'd love to see you in person soon.
You're going to make that happen.
And that fact is a sentence that you would not have been able to say 10 years ago, right? Never met this person who's made this impact on me.
Right.
Wow.
That's wild. Yeah. Well, interestingly, I also went straight into grad school for mine. I do want to take a moment just because of my history and say that I went to public school in the Arkansas Delta. I know that people think the Delta is only in Mississippi, but it is also, the river has two sides. So we also were a Delta school, and it was the height of what I consider the time when integration was actually real. So my parents were the first generation to have integrated the high school that I went to. By the time I got there, everyone was fully integrated and sitting side by side. And now I think it's just, it's reversed with the way things have occurred with things like quote unquote white flight and such, where everybody has just kind of moved
out of the Delta that I grew up with. Very few of the people I actually went to high school with are still there. But I want to say we are still in a group, like a Facebook group.
Oh, that's great.
High school friends and or everybody who graduated with us. And we're dropping now our educational experience was and how wonderful the teachers were and how prepared we were for college. So I'm hogging this by actually doing two. So shout out to everyone who was at Central High School in the late 1980s. You guys did a phenomenal job. We still talk about it. And I am sad that more people don't feel that way about their graduating class when they grew up in those kinds of areas. So to call someone out by name, though, I decided that I wanted to speak about the man who actually became my mentor in grad school. And I wanted to tell a story about how that happened because it was a research and stats class, which that was my original plan in life was research.
Sorry, that kind of takes me somewhere. So
everyone, and right. And everyone said, don't take his class because he's really hard and he takes it very seriously. So I'm like, okay, that's what I want to do. I'm going to go take the hard guy. And we did our first written project and he handed them all back in envelopes. For those of you who are not as old as me, we used to have to type these things out on paper and hand them in paper form. He graded them and handed them back in envelopes and said, do not open those until the class is over. And as I was leaving with my envelope, he said, Shannon, I need you to stay behind. Like, oh God.
Worst words to come out of a teacher's mouth.
Exactly. He made me open my envelope with him where I had received a C. I don't even think it was a regular C. I think it was a C minus.
Was it in red?
I
hope not.
No, I don't think he graded in red. I think he graded in green. It seems like it was green.
Yeah.
And he said, I know that you're not going to want to see that grade. And that is okay. The work that you did, what you have written here is really good. You just really did not follow instructions. You didn't follow the format. And it was good advice for me, basically. He was saying, you're good at this. You were an English major, but now you're in science and you're going to have to learn write differently. But then he followed it up by saying, I would be honored to write with you at any time. Now, he knew nothing about me at that point, but except that he had managed to pick up that I was probably one of those conscientious students that was going to cry when they saw a C. And he went that extra step and kind of invited me into his world and brought me along. And that has been an ongoing mentorship. He has remained a part of my life. I think I probably talked about him when we had Tyra and Linda on here as well, when we talked about mentors, because folks, that was a long time ago. I can still call that man and ask him a question, and he will still know more than me on every single topic. So, shout out to Rick Ittenbach.
There you go. I love the shout outs.
Yeah, I think that's great. Well, I'm hoping that kind of launches us in fairly easily into what we're about to talk about, because so much of supporting people through transitions is about making the kind of differences that we're talking about here. Yeah. I mean, I think I just described one. I transitioned from English to science. Needed some help and some guidance.
Location, right? And just a novel environment and the lack of awareness of what to expect and just feeling kind of wrapped in support and understanding. And interestingly enough, the teachers that stand out to me across my life were all at those pivotal moments, right? Even for good or bad. The ones that stand out in a less than positive way were for the same, probably not feeling supported at those times. So I think that communication and building and establishing safety is that huge underlying piece.
I think that really resonates with me because even when I know we're going to launch into more strategic transitions in schools, but if you think about most school structures, it's rooted in a lot of transition, right? Imagine for us, even as colleagues, at CentralReach or anyone working in, in an environment, someone said every single year, You're going to change the team that you work with, as in your coworkers or your classmates. You're going to change your leadership, as in your teacher. You're going to change the curriculum or all of the resources that we've given you. And really, that's the structure of schools. Every single year, there's a level of consistent change in your teammates and your leadership. And so I try to frame that as thinking about it so deeply, just because so much comes with that. And there's so much opportunity there, but there's also some inherent challenges that you want to get in front of, right? To make it as positive and rewarding as possible.
You hit me pretty hard there with that. My anxiety went up when you just suggested that maybe every year I get a whole new team.
Yeah. We don't do that to most adults.
We're in that year now, right?
We're in that year now, and so far, so good. There's a little uncertainty, but we've got great leaders here.
We're moving.
You know what? We are, but not really, because we've had some shifting, of course, but it's not the whole team. Nobody picked me up and dropped me into a completely new group of people. Kelly, you and I were here together last year. Nissa, you were around, maybe not directly, but you were in our group. So before we get into talking about ways that we can increase that safety and the specific types of transition that we specifically go through with special education, I do want to take a moment and give a secret word out for our CEU seekers. First one is change. I guess it makes sense. CHANGE, change. All right.
Timing for that one.
Yeah.
One of the big ways that we are transition planning in schools is for kids who are going to go into extended school year.
Mm-hmm.
That's just one example. So what kinds of things can we do within the scope of whatever role is that we have in schools to help get ready for that?
I have so many thoughts here. In so many ways, I've been heavily embedded in the CR assessments product and kind of the training there for teachers. And so I think about distributing access to the digital technology, right? If you have an assessment, an ABLS or an AFLS or a VB-MAP or whatever assessment you're utilizing, sharing those assessment results and those assessments and reports with parents and the in-home team, if the learner has an in-home team to support them. That way they can continue to maintain the progress or lack of progress targets throughout the extended school year when they have less support. In addition to, and I think we'll go here, but collaboration, giving notes on maybe keeping a schedule, token economies, all of the tools that helped that learner demonstrate success in the school setting should be sent to the treatment team at home and the family.
Yeah, that's really good. I think so many best practices there, right? And just being able to meet a student exactly where they are and have that knowledge transfer. I think if we're being honest about often extended school year programs with the goal to maintain skills, there's oftentimes just transition, not just for students, but a lot of staff, right? Teachers teaching in different classrooms. They're almost inheriting a new roster of students. So it's lessening the learning curve so that the learning can start occurring, right? Just those at a basic level, all about me sheets that can be created, right? From a teacher perspective to share with families and or just about students. So, on day one, when they walk in the door, what are some things that are going to make your transition back to school after that short break, more successful? So it's having those conversations about not only the academic side of keeping instruction and learning going, but also just those little nuanced pieces of what do I need to know about Kelly and Nissa to make that first day of ESY really successful, and having those conversations early, now in the spring, and preparing the materials.
Yeah.
So
I love that you say that, because I get the same feelings you had about stats courses with the thought of ESY in a large public school setting where I previously worked. And the planning was so key, because it's a transition for all staff, often even to a different building, depending on the size of your school or your district. And imagine the unsettling nature that feels when you're ill prepared for something as an educator, as a professional in general, and take that a step further down to how our students and our support staff are feeling. So that all about me sheet, like a quick reference sheet. Honestly, we never quite got there where I was previously in education, but would have been so impactful, because oftentimes ESYs, we're looking at a couple weeks, right? 18 days where I was previously. It takes a really long time in a school setting to develop that relationship, and really to even get to the point of maintaining and hopefully growing skills. So any supports early on is awesome.
Mm-hmm. Most of the time, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I was not a service provider within schools. So the way my role worked, and I always think it's interesting to talk to people across the country about how behavior analysts are working in schools. But my work was so-called problem behavior, which would often uncover either classroom behavior management issues or lack of not enough support for the way things were arranged in that environment. But there were related services providers that were doing ABA work, so we were able to coordinate, and they were nice enough to involve me in some of those conversations about we're planning for extended school year. It's going to be a new teacher. It's going to be a different person, different place, like you guys are talking about. And this person has a very intensive behavior support plan. So what are we going to do to make this manageable, to make this where this student is actually learning and not just in a full-on transition time the entire time that they are in ESY. And I think that that's probably true for a lot of people in a lot of places where that period of time is so short that they really never stop transitioning the entire time that they're in there. And I love your suggestions about don't wait until the day. Don't let everybody walk in there blind, which I think happens more often than we want to think happens.
Definitely.
I think in a lot of those settings, right, they've got paper, pencil data, different information is housed somewhere else and it was all moved to storage. So really, you don't have any information on that student to support and prepare them. And they may just show up for the first day of ESY with a lunchbox with no idea what the reinforcers are, what the challenging behaviors we might be encountering will look like. And it's an entirely new team because their teacher has gone out for the summer break.
Right.
Yeah. Or even when the information is digitized, access, right? Because we don't have open access to any learner's profile, nor should we. But ensuring all of those elements in advance, I think, is really critical to just setting the teams up for success.
Are there policy issues? I know, Joanne, you work a lot in this. Are there policy issues that get in the way of that? So if you're not yet on the person's team, but you will be in June, can you read those records in April?
Yeah, it's a good point that you're both bringing up. I think, of course, if that particular learner has an IEP, having access to that legal document is definitely limited to that student officially being under your teaching support or instruction. But if we can do some of these conversations earlier, then we can set the stage for this is what's going to come alongside this transition. We are working on this fact sheet about the students, or we've surveyed the parent. What are the top 3 things that would help make learning about a new teacher for your child that's going to have them for a month a little bit easier? So that when we click the button and now you have that IEP file or that All About Me sheet, you already know what's coming and the resources that will be in place to catch you up to speed a lot faster. So there's definitely, a confidentiality component to be mindful of. But I think one way of enhancing the limitations there is here's what you can expect from us in a really digestible way. That's really on the first day. Do you necessarily need to know all the goals? Maybe not, but I need to know some major things like Nissa mentioned. Like, what are your reinforcers? What are your allergies? What does your parent find to be the most important in a school day for you? We'll get you through the first day a lot more smoothly, right? So
I think it would be fun to kind of talk about that first day. So what do we want? And we're not dictators or anything, but suggestion wise, what are some good things for what should that first day look like for the teacher and the student? What should they be doing on day 1 in ESY?
I always say pairing. Mm-hmm. Building rapport.
Yeah, I double click on that. I mean, even how we started, right? Like we got to some layers of depth in what we learned from someone, but it really was like how much trust you had in that person, how comfortable you felt, and what was already setting the stage for you to learn. And that comes out of building the rapport, pairing, and just knowing if I do this in the first couple of days, the first week, the next 3 weeks could be remarkably different, right?
Yeah. I think to my time helping structure ESY sites where they kind of acted as regional schools, ensuring safety had to come first. So teachers could have the best of ideas, but that requires the kids get to your classrooms, right? And that you have the resources we've talked about. But a lot of the logistics are just hard. And I know that, my perception probably skewed from the size of the district that I came from. However, those pieces were critical. So an all hands on safety logistics was kind of key to even get to the point where we could get to know our learners. So any front end loading of those supports prior to day one are huge, I think.
Well, I don't know. I can be a balance to your large district because mine were so small. And I can tell you that so many of the cases that I would consult on were getting from the bus to the classroom.
Yeah.
Yep.
So even if it's not the traffic issue, there's so many danger points on that walk from one place to the other.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You don't
And we
know
talk about
what
these
these
change
like,
in
right?
Yeah. And the change in transitions is the same for, school districts that are busing, right? It's new routes, it's new waiting time. So you might have learners that are arriving hungry, having waited outside for a considerable period of time, sitting on a bus that didn't have air conditioning for hours at a time. And, we can hope that all of those aren't the case, or, the bus aid not arriving and what that does to, our learners we're trying to have set up for success from the start. And oftentimes we're starting with de-escalation and support in just getting kids to feel safe first or recover from whatever they experienced before they got to school.
That's so good, Kelly. Such an important point. And I think maybe the staff too, right? They may need that de-escalation as well, just because of the anxiety of, I don't really know what every student on my class list looks like physically even yet. Or I don't know who's at risk for looping, right? And who wants and might need physical support to be transitioned and or should not be engaged in that way. So it's just so many, just getting in the building needs a lot of thought, right?
Right.
Yeah, it really does.
Really good.
What you're saying right now, Joanne, is important to me too. It's not just the what about all about me sheet. It is the balancing, for the teacher to know on the front end how many students in that room are going to need what, and in what different ways are their needs going to conflict with one another, and how you're going to structure that and be prepared for that. I think just being able to get that information on the front end so you can physically design your classroom
Sure.
would be really great.
That also makes me think of the staff change that we all talked about, and how oftentimes in those specialized classrooms now potentially that lead teacher is we're co-parenting in a way, right? We've got all of these learners together we're responsible for. We may not have all met and kind of gelled into our routine, but now we're responsible and trusted with the care and safety and learning of a whole new group of students. So it's logistically, sometimes some of those teams are just meeting for the first time a week before or on the first day of school. So it's all about me for the educators, as it is
My
for the
whole answer too. I think that the ability for teachers to meet up in advance and those support staff that sometimes are coming with that learner, right? They've worked with the learner in the school year, but perhaps the lead teacher in the classroom didn't. So you're navigating so many different dynamics as the lead teacher in a classroom. You're navigating those adults, the in and out supports that may be approved for an individual learner, and the structure of the day, reinforcement schedules, hopefully. There's just so much. So, kudos to any school districts that are implementing those days before the learners arrive for ESY, because that's hard, but it's probably one of the most critical components of initial success.
Agreed.
Well, what about from the family side? What kinds of issues are coming up there?
A lot. I think, Nissa, you touched on this when you were talking about assessments even, right?
Yep.
Just being able to, that's changed for the parent. They've had the same teacher potentially all year, and now it's maybe 1 month, and I have a whole new teacher that I don't have that same rapport in. So how do we prepare that parent to learn more about, back to the kind of all about me, the educators that are going to be in that room, a little bit about them, and or giving them space to share what's important to them for the next month. What do you want us to know about your child right away? And what are you hoping for this 4-week period to do? And how can we collaborate with you ahead of time on that proactively?
And I think, having working on the consultation side, a lot of parents are anxious. It's a new school, new doors that children can run out, new access points like we're talking about. And that learner might have had a history with a previous team where I have a learner in particular, he's transitioning to middle school. And mom is super nervous because his number one behavior is elopement. And as we prepare for the IEP, it's, she already knows every access point, and he's aware because he's got siblings already at the school. And her fear is, are they prepared to block those and to walk him through the rules and to chase him when he attempts it? So I think there's a lot of anxiety for parents as they move into any transitional stage for their child, whether that be ESY or a new school or a new team. And how do they communicate that with that team?
Yeah.
We are focusing a lot in our examples and more behavior analysts on the screen right now on scary behaviors, right? But one of the conversations that probably just doesn't get as much high profile because those are so big is just the academic side of it, the actual approach to instruction. What if you're there because you need to retain academically? You're not going to run outside. You're not going to hit anybody. But you have developed these skills that maybe have had a lot of support from the classroom teacher, and we're now transferring that to a new teacher.
I think this is a good switch, right? To think about also the pro-social opportunities that come. So even how we can work on skills academically in a different way that might be really positive. Maybe the shorter day actually brings the best opportunity for Shannon because she historically has great success in the mornings, and about 12, 1 o'clock, transitionally is ready for something different, right? So where could some academic wins happen there, or even the benefit of a new group? So naturally, we're thinking about all the antecedent-based strategies for what we want to avoid. So you're right on that call out that I think I received in that way. But it's also what opportunities are going to present to look at this learner in a different way that could really be remarkably positive of having a slightly different peer group or a different teacher and or a shorter schedule that provides something that might allow for more growth and learning on the academic or, behavioral or social, emotional side.
Do we do as good of a job transitioning from ESY back to the classroom as we do from the classroom to ESY? Because that's a really good point. They may have a lot of excellent tips and information based on those observations. Kelly, what was that smile?
My head immediately went to the burnout that educators feel by the end of ESY. Like, I think you go in with this invigoration of it's a shorter, condensed school year, right? And it's about maintaining skills and hopefully having exposure to new experience. But my personal experience is by the time you get to the end of it, it is hot. We have been here. There have been behavior, and we're ready to be done. So teachers handing in their data, transferring that packet, like a physical packet, and walking out the door. And I don't blame them, but I think that just like we talk about supports on the front end, it would be, in our gold standard, perfect world, we'd be doing the same for the transition back to school. I just don't know that that's not been my realistic experience. So that was my facial expression there.
Maybe we let them have their break before they come in with their reporting on.
They've earned it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, a shout out to all educators because it's not easy. And sign up for ESY, at least in the school district with which I've been exposed, you're voluntold at best, but you're electing to continue with ESY. So big kudos to anyone listening that is doing such. Our students benefit, and it's not easy. You deserve your breaks too.
That's great.
Yeah.
And maybe also just the transition for the families for the couple of weeks that they're going to be at home or then going into camp environment, whatever it might be in that gap between starting back to school, right? That, the transition back could also be much more positive if the parent and families have the support in place for the weeks that now we're parting ways for a little bit here. And almost everyone, even our most robust programs that have extended school year and or just offer a almost 11, as close to 12-month school year as they can, always typically have some sort of break before back to school. So it's how have we provided families with the support they need? How much do we know about what's going to happen in that window of time? Are you taking a family vacation? Can we help give you some tips and tricks? Or are you really concerned, to I think a point Nissa brought up about just what would happen in those weeks off? And or maybe you're really energized and it's going to be a great time and we want to know about what that is. So I think my mind goes to equally the transition back into school, but now the transition out of ESY to you being at home or in another community or school or learning environment. And that's just a lot of change in a short period of time that, we know might not be ideal for most of the population of students that we're supporting.
I want to follow up on that, but I have to give a secret word first. And word number 2 is, I guess we'll call it graduate. GRADUATE, graduate. So I'm curious, it just popped into my head as you were speaking. And we did something similar about in another episode of what is ABA. I'm just curious, what do you guys think is, or what do you say, how do you project the purpose of education?
Oh, feels so loaded.
And I mean that as like a capital E, the educational system, the educational process. What is the purpose of education? Because I was taught something very specific and the wording of it now troubles me a little. So I'm looking for an answer.
I feel like you should provide yours first, Shannon.
Until everyone else gives a little more.
Is this that moment where you're like, not it first?
Calm down.
Nissa, you lost. You did not touch your nose on time. It's purpose of education.
I think it's to prepare students, and when whatever capacity education as a broad umbrella is, for a future, right? In academia, in life. I mean, there are so many components that education is applicable to. And I can think of it from a perspective as a parent and then someone who also consults and supports clients and students. But it's really to prepare my own children or my clients in a way that they can continue movement through the kind of academic rigor, but in holistic evaluation for life, right? That they become independent as they mature and age and they can kind of access the next step or the next level.
That was a great start, Nissa. So there's a tough one.
Here's an add on now.
Great.
Teamwork.
My quick piggyback to that, because I liked how you think about the long-term piece, right? Because we often throw out that like lifelong learning. It really is just starting in that first 12, 13 years. And so my mind also goes to, how are you learning about yourself as a learner? How do you learn best? How can we help figure that out with you and, for you? But then also, like, from the behavior analytics side, like your tokens, I feel school provides an amazing opportunity to find your reinforcers. And maybe one of my, not criticisms, but considerations is that sometimes learners, regardless of age, stage, ability, spend a lot of time doing a lot of things that maybe are not reinforcing. And so a big delight would not only be that you learn how you learn best, but also what you want to learn and what is reinforcing to you. Because after you leave this environment, that's really what will allow you to achieve the best possible outcomes, is that we find what you're going to want to pick up outside of this and will energize you and you'll be motivated and reinforced by it. But also you might love that and enjoy that thing. But if you don't have the self-management skills to learn that more deeply or execute or perform that skill, then that brings in some challenges too.
Yeah.
Kelly?
Really well said.
Yeah.
Both of those are hard to follow for sure. I was thinking, initially 3 words, learning to learn, right? It's just establishing the basics that allow you to take it in all the directions that you both so eloquently just described. So I think, the foundational pieces are huge. I also think of it, the advent of technology and all that's exploding right now, like teaching people to use their resources is so critical. And that's going to look different for a lot of different, for every learner, right? So the concept of teaching us to learn, teaching us to fish.
You guys are really good when put on the spot. I'm going to do it more often now.
Is anybody else?
So, like, in the olden days when I was in school, we were taught, and this was grad school, so it was the early 90s. We were taught to say the sentence, "The purpose of education is to train good citizens." So, and that's a John Dewey quote. And I think
honest feedback there from Kelly.
yeah.
I give you 2 thumbs down too.
I know. So I led off with, and it's problematic and it needs to be adjusted. I think that the spirit of what they were going for was meant in a different way than the way that would be perceived today. So what I like about what you guys were saying is that it's this bridge. Like Nissa, I think they were trying to get to, it's not about what you're doing here every day in this class. We want to be able to generalize this to make a big and important life for you.
Yeah.
But back to the point that Kelly and Joanne were making, that we're not here to just cram facts into your head.
Yeah.
We're here for you to become a fully functioning, independent human being to the degree that you possibly can. And so when all of this is a very long walk around, to come back to what you said originally, I think it was Joanne, about with parents and getting information to and from and sharing between. I think sometimes when I sit in IEP meetings, when they're done really well, it feels like a future planning meeting. It can almost feel like as important for the family member as it does for the student that we're talking about. It's a place for them to be heard, for their input to be valued, and for them to actually be able to have a hand in what goes on for their child in the future. Like, this is what we're going for. It's not just about hitting the next standard in the Common Core, although that may be important, but how are we going to get, especially in special education, how are we going to get to these more meaningful outcomes? And so sometimes it feels like when sitting in an IEP meeting, it can be confusing. Do I need to be in this space? Do I have any business in this space? And the connecting of people, especially when you get into that transition age, with additional supports that aren't necessarily going to be provided within the school. But we're talking about transition, so I'm going to just go ahead and say transition planning. And what are some tips that we can do to integrate that more? And give me feedback if my experience is different, because I'm seeing a real shift. Originally, that transition planning was meant to be holistic. We're going to pull in community agencies. We're going to pull in the college that you're going to go to, the workplace that you want to work in. And I don't see that anymore.
Please, state department.
Yeah.
I've worked across multiple states, and I think in my experience in California, there was a lot of collaboration, bringing in other service providers. They were in the IEP in preparation for transition. So similar to your experience, but here in Texas, it's a very different world. I'm not allowed in the schools. I've attended a number of IEPs, but I'm allowed to have minimal recommendations. I can submit the treatment plan. And I wonder if some of the disconnect is because of the new, I don't want to say new, it's been around for a while now, but the medical model of treatment now that ABA is providing, right? That is a medical service and this is an educational service, and they're to remain separate. Now I think that we should continue to collaborate, and I advise every behavior analyst to do that in the schools and out of the schools. But I think that there's kind of a divide now between, service provision.
What do you guys see, Joanne, Kelly?
Well, I think I'm still unpacking all the things that you said, and just even starting with how the IEP meeting or opportunities to collaborate as a team could be viewed initially, right? Something that really is meant to be a discussion, an ongoing dialogue, collaborative, maybe initially gets met with, this is legal. This has very specific criteria. This has already been decided. This is the approach we have in place. And that can already, going back to all the conversations around transition, breed a lot of apprehension, anxiety on both sides for educators to execute against goals that families are expecting and for families to authentically share what they value. So there's, I think, a lot more to be said there. But I also think a really good point that you brought up, Shannon, what rises to the top for me is just around transition planning and how historically we often attach that to an age and stage of a learner, right? Even by state, there are some criteria. Once you're 14, this legally should be included in your IEP. But how much, if we go back to that example in the beginning that I was sharing, transition planning is every single year. Yeah. Because changing your classmates, your teacher, and maybe every 3 to 4 years, your office or your school site is changing, right? So if we just treated transition planning as part of a best practice in an IEP anyway, we're all going to get together and have an open conversation about change year over year, I think we would do a remarkably better job by the time we get to that transition into community. And now are we collaborating with everyone across environments if we treated that as a best practice from the very beginning of, preschool, and year over year, we started to have that conversation more deeply and opened up the door. So I don't know that I brought a lot of solution there, but just a way to reframe where I think we could be going a little bit wrong or doing it better is that we wait so long to start transition planning when we should treat every year as a high quality transition plan.
And I do want to jump real quick. I think, Kelly, you have something to say, but Gerhardt and colleagues wrote a paper in 2023. It's an amazing paper, but adulthood begins in preschool. It is my favorite. And they talk about planning for adulthood as early as preschool too. Yeah. Really thinking about all of those life skills and the meaningful outcomes that are going to impact the learner early on and then at every stage thereafter.
Yeah, that's actually a great segue for some of my thoughts that are brewing on all of this, because I had the fortunate experience of really high quality ABA training in a setting that is not the standard in public education. So the ability to have that constant cross collaboration. Yet another shout out to my PCDI crew in New Jersey. They had the ability to ensure that parents were involved in every step of the process from preschool on. And it felt like, without knowing, it was always a focus on where is this learner going to be in adulthood. And each year there was the consistent planning for that. And, the ability to also pair it with group homes and settings for work experience as learners got older. And seeing that juxtaposition to the public school settings in which I've worked is hard. It's really heartbreaking because I don't think that the focus is there. And I understand the variables of why, but I think we could all do better.
I love what you just said, and I will piggyback on it to say that, I started my career in adult services and worked backwards. And I have frequently said, if everybody who works with really small children would just go to a place, go to a community that is specially built for adults with intellectual developmental disabilities, where you can see the kinds of things that if you don't address it early, this is what it comes to. And by address it, people automatically think I mean problem behavior, and I don't. Missing skills, things that are going to take more intensive instruction than what you're going to do normally in the classroom. But they could be learned if taught to fluency earlier in life. Third secret word is prepare, PREPARE. But yeah, I think it would be a great suggestion. I know that we are not here to change anything. We're here to offer suggestions and try to be realistic in what people can do in the structure that exists right now. Mm-hmm. But if I could just have one wish, everybody would go on that field trip. Everybody would. And not just to go look like you do in grad school where you go to all of those different places and visit. Go work for 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks, I think, is all that it would take to work with adults and get another perspective on what to do in schools.
Future, that left into the future shapes how you treat today. But I do, to what you provided, Shannon, before, it makes me think about some great things I've seen even in transition or in the ESY experience where for some learners, the limitations of everything that needs to fit into a typical school day in the typical 10 months, really unique opportunities are presented in ESY. And I've seen some really interesting and innovative approaches to ESY where the focus has been more on, this is a great time to focus on that collaboration with community and bring in other school partners because it's a dedicated 4 to 6 weeks where we can treat things a little bit differently. And so I've seen that work really well to focus on expanding student social repertoires where they have like a cadence of almost weekly field trips and experiences with the community that would be really hard to do in a typical school year. So it's also a nod back to there are unique points in the year that can provide some of these opportunities that might feel really much a challenge or push in a typical school year.
Well, that gives me an idea. We're sort of at the end now, but we started out with shout outs. I would love to, we can't shout out probably names and such for this one, but if you've seen something done really well and you want to take a moment now to say, I saw somebody do this one time and it worked out great, here's your opportunity to shout it out. And I will let you think, because obviously I wouldn't ask a question that I myself didn't already have an answer for. So I will talk first. You can think of your next point.
Okay.
But I worked with a school district that really got it, that little bit of time that is going from the middle school to the high school, even if it's just a different building on the same campus. They understood that. And so at the end of the school year, even though I still don't know why this is such a big deal, there's policies that you cannot know who your child's teacher is going to be until the first day of school or the day before or whatever. They would go ahead and assign for students that they knew that it was going to be a real issue, who that teacher was going to be, what classroom that person was going to have, and they would just commit to it on the front end. And they would begin on the last month of school, just scheduling periods of time where that student could go sit in that classroom and just observe and see what is going on. Practice walking to that classroom. Take whoever, if they had an aide, take their aide with them so that they felt comfortable having some one-on-one time with the new teachers just to get to know each other. And it helped so very much. And I was so proud of them because they realized how important that was. All right. Have you had enough time? Who's got another example?
All right, I'll go. So I think I actually have two, but one I've seen in my own children's schools where they structure, and it's run in cooperation with like our local township, transition camps. So it touches on a little bit what you said, Shannon, but there is a transition camp for kindergartners, and the week is focused on fun and it's focused on learning routines. So classroom routines, unpacking your backpack, finding your desk, the things that kids that haven't been exposed to school yet may not know, right? That's always been a practice as long as I've lived around here, and I think that it's really beneficial. I have a daughter transitioning to middle school next year, and they're doing the same for the middle school. Figure out what lockers are like and learn the hallways before you get there. And for my kid in specific, this is going to really help reduce some anxiety that she'll probably otherwise feel with novel environments. But to connect to ESY, I think I unexpectedly walked into a classroom where that teacher, either because of access or time or just sheer dedication, had student materials. I'm saying materials, but it was art or a student's picture or their family picture or like something they had done hung on the ESY walls. And that feels so simple, right? Like we decorate our classrooms before school. The ability for that educator to do that for the population of learners that maybe weren't hers during the school year, I walked in and was like, this feels already like home for them. And I think that is probably really impactful for kids that might be stressing out in their arrival to ESY. So those two things stood out to me.
I think my piggyback that fits with both of those was just how much thought we can put into this as the adults, right, that are around. But we know there's so many studies and research around just the benefits of any areas of growth around peer-led initiatives. And so a nice complement to what you're describing, Shannon and Kelly, was a PALS program that I saw in a school district in New Jersey. A little shout out to New Jersey. And they did an amazing job all year long. This was particularly in a middle school of pairing high school buddies with middle school buddies. And so there were various meeting points on a monthly basis where they would come into the middle school environment and then join in a lesson. Or when it was field day or a pep rally, your pal would be collaborating with you. But then it was time to then transition to high school. You potentially already had some relationship. So they would time it where that high school pal wouldn't be potentially off into the work environment or college, right? They would be able to help transition their peer buddy. And then when they did those transition activities from middle school to high school, they would meet with their pal to go to their locker to practice opening a locker, or they would attend then the high school pep rally in that last year of middle school and already had a familiar face. So I guess the nod there is we're all describing so many thoughtful best practices that are adult led, but just to infuse something where even if we've come up with the bright idea, that it's being led and driven with a peer, because any of those transitions, I think, are going to be met with far more success if there's a peer involved in the practice along the way, because that's the relational piece that will really help learners grow in schools. It's not just what we do, it's what their peers are doing alongside them.
So smart. That is so true.
Yeah.
Nissa, we'll give you the last word.
So many. I really love your story there, Joanne. And I will say that I've seen that done in a number of classrooms where I worked as a consultant. Again, this was a while back, but where teachers really, their education and training was in education and, academia, but some very specific general education teachers, when I was supporting students in inclusion, really wanted to learn about ABA and behavior analytic strategies. So they would create little spaces where peers could go and work together and provide tokens and token economies for the general ed students in supporting the learners that were coming in for inclusion into the classroom. I love that piece because, again, as we're thinking of transitioning a learner from a very specific classroom for their needs in their own space into a classroom that is really a little bit less predictable, that supported these learners in understanding, all of these friends are going to help me. And this learner in particular didn't know that they were receiving tokens for being supported.
Yeah. And how mutually beneficial is it, right? Of developing a deeper sense of empathy, understanding, but also maybe that pal wants to go into education, and what a great opportunity for them to experience that in a really unique way before they're out in the community and world too. So,
and if they don't have that idea, maybe that gives them that idea.
Right.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. Well, I just want to wrap up by just telling our listeners now, we have primarily focused on content that is for behavior analysts and RBTs at Sierra Institute, but we are doing our best to try and add some content that will also, or maybe more focused on that education piece. So whether you are a behavior technician who works in schools or a behavior analyst collaborating, we're going to try to be increasing those offerings, but also looking for some ways that we can multi-purpose those content pieces. A lot of the things I think that we have for behavior analysts or for RBTs could also be useful for teachers and for paraprofessionals in the school district. So one of the things that will be coming very soon, as soon as I do my part as editor-in-chief, we're going to have a course on increasing positive behavior in general. So just some tips. And it's a really good course because it's founded in Dr. Partington's work. So it's not just the regular, here's the functions of behavior, although that is there, but it takes that next step looking at what are you going to teach? What are the important skills once you've done this assessment? How do you know where to begin? So that's going to be coming forward. As well as some additional coursework that we're going to be bringing that's not fully along in the pipeline yet, but we're going to be looking at some courses for assessments and going into that assessment to IEP goal system, and looking at also some additional work for preparing for ESY. So be on the lookout for that. And most of our listeners are probably behavior analysts. So if you're in schools or if you're working with teachers who you think would be interested, let them know that we have that coming. All right. Thank you, guys. This has been a lot of fun. I'm always excited when we can talk about school-based stuff. So hopefully we'll do it again soon in the future. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for watching this episode of The Behavioral View. To get your CEU, follow the link in the instructions below. You can then go to the attendance verification quiz, where you'll enter in the secret words and pay the CEU fee to generate your certificate. If you've already done the work, you may as well get the credit.